Welcome everybody to the VES Education presents a tour of the VES VFX studio. The intention of this, as I put on my glasses, is to answer some questions. What are the main roles in a visual effects studio? What do the people in those roles enjoy about them? What's your career path into each of the studio pillars? And to help us answer these questions, we've got a great panel to hear from today. From production management, we've got Lara, Managing Director of Rise Visual Effects Studios. On pre-production art, pre-viz, we've got Helen, Choi, Creative Director and Head of Culture at Woodblock. For on-set, we've got Andrew McPhillips, VFX Supervisor at Spin VFX. On CG animation, we've got Aulo, Licinio, Animation Supervisor at Framestore. For CG layout / environments, we've got Adrien Lambert, CG environment and generalist at DNEG. He's over in Vancouver. For technical FX, we've got Foot Yüksel, Head of Simulation at Rise Visual Effects Studio. Oh. For compositing, we've got Ben Warburton, Lead Senior Compositor at Pixomondo. On the studio side, we've got Arnon Manor. He's the Education Committee Chair at the VES and VP of Visual Effects at Sony Pictures. And myself, it's Christopher Hebert from Side Effect Software, Houdini. I'm based in Toronto, and I'll be your moderator for this session. So, we're going to go in the order we've got kind of an order that flows a little bit through the pipeline, although that's obviously a moving target, but we'll start with production management. So Lara, do you want to start with describe your job and what do you like about it?
Hi, yeah, so thanks for the intro. I'm the Managing Director and Executive VFX Producer at Rise in London. I joined the company 3 years ago, so my role was to open the new studio in London, which was the latest addition to 4 offices that Rise already had in Germany. What I love about my job and what I've loved about the last 3 years has been to really create a studio from scratch, obviously with the building blocks of what existed already at Rise, but create something new, get a team together and create a structure that artists really enjoy working in. I think there's nothing better at the end of a show when you deliver a show and everybody's happy, they don't feel overwhelmed, they don't feel burned out, and it's just really nice to kind of work with a team and to create something that everybody really enjoys working in. So.
That's great. And how would you get into that career?
So I come from a production background. So I started as a VFX coordinator. I went on to become a production manager, then a producer. I did not study anything technical at university. I studied literature and theater, but I always wanted to work in film production. So throughout my teenage years, I always made sure I worked on, short films and always tried to get involved where I'd say my degree didn't allow me to. But when I started applying for jobs, I applied to everything, and VFX is what came up. I was based in London at that point. I had just finished my master's, and I was given an opportunity to move to Berlin to work on a Martin Scorsese film, Hugo at the time for Pixomondo, and it was an amazing opportunity. So just jumped on that, and I've never regretted it since, and I'm still in VFX 12 years later.
Fantastic. Thank you. Helen, over to you.
So my role at Woodblock is creative director and head of culture. And what little bit distinguishes Woodblock from the rest of the list that I've seen here, we're I think smaller company, and also we not only do VFX but also do character animation and some other IP projects that are in-house. I would say style-wise we have very variety of styles in-house. Anyways, having said that, that kind of links to the reason why my role is also as a creative director. It still involves sometimes doing hands-on work and also leading the team and whatnot. And this other side of my role, which is head of culture, this is something recent that is still kind of developing into something. as a as a company that was growing from very small size to medium size, there is sort of a point where you realize, okay, we need to have more structure into our system. So this is something where we saw a need of, and then that I jumped into. So for me, this is like really exciting to be able to kind of organically grow as the company grows, and do what I enjoy, and continue on that path.
Great.
Yeah, so that's the brief. Yeah.
Excellent. And how would you get into that career path?
Well, I've studied in LA, Otis College of Art and Design for digital media, and then as soon as I was done with my studies, I was hired as an intern at Motion Theory in LA, and after that, it just like snowballed into kind of freelancing here and there, and I ended up leading there's a leading position at PsyOp New York for 7.5 years, and then after that, at some point, I needed a change, so made the move to Germany, and then I naturally was connected to the Woodblock guys at Berlin because some of them had been at PsyOp New York. So yeah, I've been sort of like generalist to begin with, and then slowly found my place of like leaning more into leading the team, and then now directing, and I am very like keen on collaborating with the team. So yeah, that's like generally how I got into my role.
Excellent. Thank you. So to take us through on set, it's Andrew McPhillips.
Hey there. So my name's Andrew McPhillips. I'm a visual effects supervisor, and I deal with both on set and at the studio, which I work for Spin VFX in Toronto. And the best way, I suppose, to describe my process is that sometimes it's at the very beginning. There's some filmmakers who want to make a film, and they've identified some VFX shots that they're interested in. So we'll do like a bid, and we'll identify those and talk about the mythology of those, and identify all the shots that are needed, that will need VFX. Then the role then becomes the on-set VFX supervisor, where your job is to make sure that the shots that we bid, we're able to achieve and get the right elements. So when those blue screen shots, whatever they are, come back to the studio, we're able to work on them in the way that we hoped we had initially. And then one of the things about being on set is you are very much responsible for the director's vision and the filmmaker's vision. So a lot of what you do on set is learning as the vision of the show kind of coalesces, your job is to picture that in your head and be able to take that back with you to the VFX studio that you work in. So I think it's probably a reasonable summary.
Thanks. And what was your path into that career?
My background, I started off in England in photography and film, and then I ended up in upstate New York doing computer animation at grad school, and then was at Disney and then DreamWorks. I did a lot of feature animation for a long time, and Sony being another studio, and then moved between VFX and feature animation, and then ended up going more into the CG soup world and head of CG, and then settled on VFX souping. So I enjoy being hands-on and doing all kinds of things, but there's many, many ways for people to come into being an on-set VFX soup. I just had one. There's 10 other equally good ways to do it.
That's probably a theme that we'll see throughout this session, is that there's lots of ways to get into all of these kind of roles. We'll hear from your path, right? I think that's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
CG animation. Let's flip to Aulo Licinio.
Hey. Well, my name is Al. I'm originally from Brazil, and it's been 8 years since I moved to Montreal. So when I don't have this love and hate relationship with winter, I am leading a team of animators throughout high-end profile movies. What I love about the animation team is that we all come together to really draw every single, when I say draw, is puppeteer around our rigs, so we can do 24 drawings to get 1 second of a performance. So that's a lot of work. We also, our main objective is also always to ingest and enhance personality performances. And we just love to do that. So we go into studying anatomy, studying performance itself, psychology. So it's really fun to see the whole team getting together and just breaking their minds and seeing how to deconstruct a performance.
Right on. And how did you get into that career?
Yeah, as I said, come from Brazil. So early my career, I studied fine arts for 2 years. It was supposed to be 4, but I'm a dropout. Not sure if it's good to say that, but yes, I'm a dropout of school. And because I really want to focus on animation, I found Maya out of nowhere. Someone introduced to me, and I did a small course about it and really started doing a self learning by myself. So I got a little bit of work for advertisement, games, TV series, feature films, all in Brazil. I got my first experience with VFX, remote animation from Brazil in 2011. So that's a long time ago. And then I moved to Montreal, where I'm just working with visual effects at Framestore. It's been past 6-7 years now.
Excellent. Thank you. On CG layout and environments, Adrien Lambert.
Hey, hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm a CG environment supervisor at DNEG. So my job is mostly to lead a team of generalist artists or matte painters in the process of environment production for movies or TV shows. Things I like the most about this job, it's I think the creative and technical freedom when it comes to creating environment. Of course, this methodology and freedom that also depends very much on the budgets of the show and its cinematography. And I think that's a component that's really making the job so interesting, because in some cases we have fairly simple set extension that can require matte painting work. So mostly 2D or 2.5D type of approach, while some more ambitious shot, you would have complex camera move, right, lighting interaction. So those would require more 3D approach. And sometimes it would even be a full CG environment. So that's what's pretty fun with this job. You don't have time to get bored in this department. There are always some exciting shots in sequence to look forward. And depending on the complexity of the shot, you can either do it by yourself or with a small team of generalists, which can create a pretty big sense of ownerships on environments and the shots. So it's what I like as well is it's very much a place where we cultivate growth, both technically and artistically. So there is not like one show where we end up learning nothing. It's always we are trying to push our skills, to push our knowledge. And at least as a supervisor, my biggest fear would be, so sure, delivering a project is one thing, but otherwise, I think if an artist by the end of the show doesn't learn something valuable, I think that I would be pretty sad about that. But we have an awesome team, and I can't see how that would happen. So yeah, that's pretty much my role at DNEG. When it comes to getting into generalist kind of position, I think in my case, it was, I'm not sure I'm a good example actually, because back in the days, it was, generalist wasn't such a thing, or it would be mostly on kind of commercial type of work. And after I graduated from Artifacts, basically I started to work as a compositor, well, in Stuttgart, at Pixomondo. And after that, I realized, oh, I kind of miss CG and stuff. So I was like going back more to doing commercial and being more like a generalist. And in there, you kind of, yeah, touch a bit of every discipline in the CG. So for me, that was more fun. And I think I kind of keep working toward the goal to actually be generalist, but on movies. And I think in general, what we are looking for, especially for juniors, it's not people who are great at everything, but people who usually have a passion for environment and making pretty images. So in terms of skills, having like modeling, texturing skills is great, obviously, but we also have the help of other departments for that. So I would say the emphasis when it comes to generalist would be more, on one hand, assembling a final image, like layouting asset, props, building, scattering some vegetation, and all kind of dressings. And on the other hand, that would be more like a look dev side, meaning more that the lighting, the shading, the compositing. And at the end of the day, you want to use, you don't want to be great at everything, but you want to use those skills to help the storytelling of a shot. That's what environments are about. And I think if you manage to tell a story through a work, that's, I think, the biggest accomplishment, then there is a great chance that, well, someone is interested to hire you. So yeah, I would say that's pretty much it when it comes to environments, really.
That's really cool. Thank you. On the technical effects side, Fuad Yüksel.
Hello, I'm Fuad. My name is Fuad Yüksel. I'm head of effects at Rise Visual Effects Studios. So my job basically is being responsible for like day-to-day management of the effects department operations. And then together with all the other head-offs and supervisors, I'm responsible for making sure we achieve the highest possible output and results, that we establish workflows and tools that the departments need, and yeah, just make sure everything runs as smooth as possible, and then also keep up with the technical updates, obviously, on the effects side. At the same time, also talk to production to make sure we hit the needs on specific things that we need on shows, interview people, review shots, like all kind of balancing out as a hub or go-to person between supervisors, head-offs, productions, and effects people to make sure we deliver the best possible output and have the highest standards in-house and externally. Yeah, it's basically my tasks.
So you guys in the FX team blow things up, make, simulate things, create the movement and dynamicism in movies. What's the favorite part of your job?
Everything that you just mentioned. So I actually, to be honest, I never had one day in my entire career where I really felt that I have to work. That's honest. Never ever. So it's just like, I don't know, it's passion and it's fun. And yeah, we blow things up. And it's, yeah, quite some technical job, I would say, but yeah, very fun.
A lot of,
to add a lot. Yeah.
I guess every job requires a lot of lateral thinking, but you guys are continually having to sort of push into so many different areas and push the software and the technology, and fascinating to see what you guys get up to. On compositing, Ben Warburton.
Hello, I'm Ben Warburton. I work out of Pixomondo, Toronto. I'm a compositing lead. My role as a compositing lead is to add support, to help with artists as well as supervisor. So we will look at mostly quality control, at least in Pixomondo. I know some places they have the lead will also be checking shots, but for the most part, I will be focused on just quality checking, keeping things, just non-sequence related stuff. So I also, at least using Star Trek as an example, I'm also a compositor at the same time, because generally we may only be leading certain sections of a TV show. So we may just have time to do some shots, which is what I actually really enjoy doing. So I continue to do shots here and there, and that includes taking shots that are look dev, which then I can hand off to other artists if they have other sequence shots that are similar to mine. And yeah, I mean, it's basically just a supporting role, just trying to bridge the gap between the supervisor and the artist, and also production staff, making sure everyone knows what they need to be doing. And now that we're working from home, I think it's really important to make sure that, you know, having calls regularly, sometimes personal, sometimes department, just to make sure everyone's okay. Because it's harder now that we're working from home, and I'm not sure how long that's going to last. But at the moment, I think Pixomondo is pretty much hybrid. So yeah.
And what was your career path into your role?
So I actually had a little bit of a strange one, really, because I started out in graphic design, and I went to a course specifically to be like, okay, I want to do motion design as well, just to like add to it. And it came across that they had compositing and other fundamentals in 3D and stuff. And I just sort of like leaned towards that. And it was a bit of a U-turn. So although I studied graphic design and I have that as, you know, like color theory and all that, it does help me. Yeah, I just completely changed direction. So a lot different than some other paths. And a bit like Aulo, I wasn't really the best student at all. So it was very much like a grind. And so I actually worked at Spin in the early days, in their old building, actually. So I was doing roto artist and paint. And then from there, I just kind of worked my way up. And I think once you get sort of the higher roles, you know, you have to use your eye, your color, artistic, and it's just like a completely different thing from when you first started out. I loved the fact that I started out as just doing fundamentals, because I think just building that base allows you to just then accelerate. And I kind of, when I moved to Pixomondo, I just sort of exponentially grew very quickly, and that allowed me to take on bigger shots. And then, you know, after I think 10 years now, I've complete. So, yeah.
Excellent. On the studio side, Arnon Manor.
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. I have, so where's my slide? So my day job, I'm actually Senior Vice President of Visual Effects at Sony Pictures. So I manage the visual effects on the feature side, working with McPhillips right now. And I'll talk about that for a second. And then my evening job is I chair the education committee of the Visual Effects Society. I'm a board member of the Visual Effects Society as well. I'll get into that first, just to say that the concept of creating the Visual Effects Society education committee kind of had two parts to it. One is to help, and there's a reason, and I'll get to that in a second. One is to help the visual effects members, membership overall, in terms of just helping them in their career, education, anything that they need kind of on the education front. The other aspect was to actually create opportunities and learning opportunities to bring new talent into our industry, and actually specifically aimed at what I would consider to be non-traditional avenues, people that don't necessarily have to go to a 4-year college or a master's degree, or, you know, how can we find talent across the board from, again, what I would call non-traditional high schools and other type of opportunities. So that's a big part of that. The reason why
Oh, I think we just lost you. Arnon, maybe you're on mute.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yep.
Yeah, for some reason it wants to go to my AirPods all the time. That's what happens. So throw it away. So the reason why I was wanted to kind of create the education committee and why I'm passionate about it is because I've had a very varied career path, and people came to me and said, "How did you get to where you started to where I am now?" So I started as a VFX artist, worked my way, you know, in Europe, including Framestore when we were 6 people in the CG department. I'm showing my age. Back in the day, and DNEG when it was very small, moved out here to the States as just a CG artist, and then moved around a lot, just moved, you know, kind of maneuvered my career in such a way. And eventually 10 years ago, I landed to be a studio executive. But I was an artist. I sat, like you guys, on the box in dark rooms for, hours at a time. And so I'm very passionate about helping people not get pigeonholed, move in their career, expand in their career, develop their career. And that's one of the kind of bigger aspects of the education committee. On the studio side, and then I'll get into kind of how I started. But on the studio side, my job is, how do I even describe it? It's extremely varied. I work on several, movies at the same time. Some, from development through delivery. So literally from script stage, script comes down, which we might or might not make. And I do the first breakdown. I break it down. I analyze it. I talk to the filmmakers, sometimes before a director is involved. Sometimes there is a director or a producer, and we figure out internally at the studio, how can we make the movie, how much it's going to cost. And obviously for my side, it's what are the costs? What's the visual effects aspects? Where are we going to go? Who are we going to go? Who's going to do the work? Which vendor? Choosing the supervisors, the producers, all the way, and then managing that process across the board, including filing shots through the pre-production, production, and delivery until the movie comes out, including marketing and everything else that goes in there. So it's an extremely interesting role, and actually using my experience as having been a visual effects artist and being on the box and working for various vendors is really useful, because when I'm sitting in a dark room with the director and the producers and the studio execs, other execs looking at shots, I do go back to my days as an artist and look at shots from that we're about to final or have finaled or have comments on from a creative standpoint, not just from a Excel spreadsheet standpoint, which a lot of people think that's what studio executives do, but it's not. So my career, like I said, I started off, I went to art school in London. I then did a master's degree in animation, actually in Paris. My first job was at Booth on a movie called The City of Lost Children, again, showing my age. And when there was no, we had to literally create everything from scratch. There was no plugins. We did the green smoke. People have seen, that literally was, somebody had to write that for me, and I was animating it and compositing. And at that point, we did everything. And then I switched off at some point and went into producing and produced a few independent features, which how I jumped into producing. So I went from being an artist and kind of a career path towards supervision, went off and started producing and making my own independent features. And that's what led me to producing and eventually led me to be a studio exec.
Very cool. It's so fascinating listening.
I will share something. Can I share a screen?
Of course you can, yeah.
Oh, we don't have this, it said disabled.
Yeah, sharing screen might not be possible right now.
Okay, I won't.
But I was going to say, it's just so terrific hearing all these varied paths and how they,
Oh, here you go. I will share this because I think it's relevant for the path.
Perfect.
People ask what my career path is, and I think it's applicable to everybody. At some point there was an entry. I'm somewhere in the middle here, and then at some point there'll be an exit. But I'm, somewhere there. And
if you take everybody's of those same, it just becomes a VFX studio. So can we talk about just how the flow of work through the studio a little bit? So a project starts as the idea, probably at the studio side, right? So you've got you're going to be doing a project, and then you bring it to VFX studios to be scoped out and quoted. That probably goes to Lara.
Yes, I mean, we do obviously get to bid and pitch for quite a few projects. And then obviously, you kind of discuss with the execs, first of all, if it fits in well with obviously the kind of skill set that you're known for. Mm-hmm. Every facility is known sometimes for different things. And kind of, working out what sequences will work nicely. and also what kind of supervisors you want to pitch for it. Again, I think, you know, supervisors have their strong points so just make sure that it works well to get the best, you know, for the show. So yeah, I think that's when, you know, I guess discussions like with studio and comes to us, and then the discussions goes more on the technical side with once, you know, you get the show awarded and start prepping a crew, a team, and start devising a plan for the long run.
So let's talk about that. So you've got the project, they say yes, you sign on the dotted line, and then how do you start planning that out and bringing it all together?
So you're obviously looking at what skill sets you'll require, the timeline that you have, and trying to build, you know, how what kind of crew you'll need in terms of numbers and what departments, and sit down with your supervisor, and yeah, come up with the best and start prepping your best team also in production, of course. Then you've got your producers, your coordinators, your production managers.
Right on. And then you've got that flowing. What's sort of the first step? Probably pre-viz would be, you're working on pre-viz pretty quickly? Is that, Helen, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, maybe Helen for that.
Well, oh, what is this? Hold on. Yeah, so sure, like again, as I mentioned before, I like our studio maybe doesn't necessarily fit into the traditional visual effects model, but yeah, like there's always previous process involved, which is always so crucial for planning out and assessing the amount of work and what kind of technical help that we need. And so yeah, it's such a crucial point to like start the planning and in the most concrete way. And once you have the previs, then you can really sit down, the whole team can sit down and really analyze each shot and be like, okay, like what do we think the workload would be from the scale of 1 to 10, like what is the difficulty? And I feel like this process is like really important to analyze. In the meantime, also making sure that the quality level lives up to its standard that the creatives are looking for. So yeah, that is what I can speak to that process. And
Andrew, are you, in terms of the onset, have you already gotten kind of the previs in advance of going on set, or is on set happening at around the same time, and then you're starting to?
It's interesting. So often the previs, we do previs as well, and when we have very complicated shows, the previs is very important because it can identify not just visually what we need, but also, for instance, heights of techno cranes and the size of the soundstage, and it gives a lot of important information to the filmmakers. So we do previs, but very often we're literally just working from the shots that we identify. As Arnon mentioned, he and others will come up with a VFX breakdown of these are the shots. We figure out the mythology, and very often we just go on set and just film without previs, which happens more frequently. And so, yeah, when we go on stage, the main thing is we've clearly identified the shots that we need to do and the scope of work for those. So when we're there on the day, the on-set VFX suit would be able to visualize the elements that he or she needs to take back to the studio, and also has formed a lot of understanding with the director and the filmmakers about what the end result is. So those two things come back to the studio, and then from there we begin the actual VFX process.
And Adrien, at what stage are you starting to build out your environments and build those worlds?
Well, it's often very early stage, actually. Really depends on the project. Sometimes it's even during shooting or before. in general, what we receive is either at best some concepts from the clients, in which case, well, we are ready to kind of start assessing the the scope of all the work we're gonna do, kind of break down things if we're gonna need some support from other department, like build, to create some assets, right? And from that, we kind of start mocking up a first pass, like a blocking stage of the environments. And we can kind of move on to different stage as things get like approved with client. Sometimes the thing is, it's sometimes so early stage that the decision kind of tends to shift to other direction, and it's part of the filmmaking process. And we always have to kind of find ways to make sure that things are gonna work out, and yeah, just try to make exciting environments for those movies. So that's kind of a fun work.
Cool. And Aulo, are the characters, as the world is being built, are the characters starting to get in place as well? You're starting to get those concept drawings and then character modeling and the rigging, and that's happening at the same time, or is that?
Yeah, that's happening really early in the process as well. I think as soon as the show is awarded by the studio, we already have, we take the concept, we start going through modeling and rigging it, creating all the structure for the puppet itself. Animation wise, as an animation supervisor, we're overlooking everything on the show, so we can start even as early as doing actually previs. As we're talking with Andrew, we can do a previs that's going to aid on the set. We do have post-vis as well, that we actually take the place that were shot and we start doing a first pass on everything very dirty, just to make sure that all the continuity throughout the sequence works. And usually it's scrapped and then do again, scrap and then do again until we have the whole sequence built up. An average is, I think last project was 1,300 shots that were on the cut floor. So yeah, so it's a normal number, let's say. And then we also get into development. And this just to say, we have very rough passes on the character. So you don't have the final character yet. It's just something really to have a quick look and see if everything is working, even test if the concept and the design does work. So then after that, we go into development of the characters as well. So before we actually get to shot work, when we explode the crew and we have a lot of people, we have a very select team. And this is when we're talking a lot with management and production. It's always about, do we have enough people? Do we don't have enough people? Do we need more people? Do we need this level of seniority? Do we need these kind of, it's a big conversation that goes on pretty much weekly as we develop the characters. And developing the characters can go halfway through the project. It's really about, if I'm imagining something like anything coming out of Harry Potter, then, you know, you got an eagle's wing, you got a body of a lion, you get the toes of a cow, whatever it is, you have to blend all these different kind of creatures into one and create this unique performance. There's a lot of rules set up. There's a lot of thought process behind that. And you end up learning a lot of stuff from your characters. A quick example, we did work on His Dark Materials, and we needed to, I don't know how many people know it, but we did a Yorick the Bear and the armors on top as well. The amount of redesigns to make sure that that design was actually functional to the movements, we went through at least 5-6 iterations when we have to go through the whole process, which is and the concept, the design, the modeling, the rigging, the animation. And then on top of that, there's all the simulations. So animation is just a part there that we pass it on to the creature department, which usually does all the fat, all the fur, all the skinning, jiggles. We love jiggles in animation, so jiggle. And then we put on the armor on top, and then we realized it doesn't work. We broke up all the physics, so let's scrap it and do it again. So there's always this kind of loop. It takes a long time in development. After we get that, I like to say that we create our set of rules to make sure that our characters are grounded in certain reality, which is the challenge of the visual effects, is to make sure that everything seems real. Then we move on to to shot work, which starts usually from the match move, the tracking, which takes the plates that were shot on set, track it into the environment that we have, that we're starting to build the prop in a very rough environment for animation. We start doing our animation based on the post-viz, on our sketch viz, which is with drawings, whatever way we want to do it. And then we start building up the shot using a lot of reference. Sometimes we'll come in a form of that we just shoot reference of the animators itself, dancing around, whatever it is, and try to mimic on top. We search for reference if it's a creature, or in some cases we get motion capture to start. That's a decision that we usually have per project, and it happens very early in the process as well. So yeah, it goes like a whole scope there.
No, that's great. That's perfect. Do you guys get into crowds, or is that another team? Is that the FX team?
It really depends on the crowds. We usually have crowds having, like if it's cars in the background, usually we have an FX team that's going to place them. If we have crowds, like people walking back, what we usually do is, like, let's say we have a shoot of motion capture of a background crowd taking pictures of a monument. Fine, we do it, and then animation do a passive cleanup to make sure that the camera's in hand, it's not floating up there, the feet are on the ground, everything makes sense, and we pass that to crowds where they're going to populate. But if we're doing, just came out of Fantastic Beasts 3, wherein we have, don't know again who saw it, so sorry, any spoiler, but we have these crowds of little like scorpion creatures walking around, and that is a big communication between the crowds department and animation. So we developed a whole behavioral system coming out of animation, knowing when they're going to run, when they're going to jump, when they're going to stand up, sit down, whatever the behavioral system is. It's all like nodes interconnected. We developed that, passed it to crowds, and it was a couple of months testing them and pushing the boundaries of those limitations to make sure that when crowds actually picked that up, it was as the animation intended it to be. So there's, depending on the project, there's a lot of conversation between crowds and animation.
Yeah, makes sense. And Fu, at what stage is FX coming into play? Is there stuff happening in FX while the rest of the show is still being built, and then it comes into FX and then it goes back out, or are you sort of waiting until a lot of the story is done and then layering in the FX towards the end?
Basically, like usually you would have FX quite far late in the classical pipeline, right? Because we have to wait for like the asset build, modeling, surfacing, and everything. But what we, the soups and the head ofs and leads also do is, like, from scratch, from the beginning of the show, we already develop the tools, the setups, all the groundwork basically that makes it later on more smooth through the whole project. So we just make sure right from the very first beginning that we have everything already there and set up once it really gets into like the classical shot work. And then also prior to that, we talk a lot to pipeline, to the supervisors, obviously, and also to production to make sure that we have all the tools that we need from pipeline, not only FX tools, but also like pipeline tools to make a smooth transition from one department to another via FX, which also includes CFX usually. And yeah, this is basically so we are there from the beginning, but we ramp up quite a lot towards the later part of the pipeline, yes.
That makes sense. And Ben, you've got things, I think that the story is quite complete at that point when it comes to you.
Somewhat.
Yeah, so, and is there, so let's talk about that first. So you get the story, and then how do you bring it to life?
Yeah, so I will be working with the comp supervisor to decide, like we're going to be on the front end. So if there's any cleanup or rig removal, that kind of thing that needs to be done, or rotos, those things need to be tasked out like early on. Because that way, like if things get real tight towards the end, we can have all that stuff finished, renders and stuff come in, and then we can get it to the client as soon as possible. And that's just the same as like if we were finaling or if we were just sending like whips or something like that, like work in progress. So I was actually fortunate, just to add to Andrew's point on set, is that now that Pixomondo is doing virtual production, we are also on the front end. So we have an art department that works now with the client that comes up with ideas and stuff. And that is then the springboard for all the Unreal environments that then goes on set. And I was fortunate enough to go on set and be an Unreal operator to have the compositor eye, because we have a lot of like blending and stuff to do. So I was able to actually see in Star Trek Discovery, I was able to see both ends. And then, so when it finally came to comp, I had a better understanding of what we were going to get, because we predominantly worked on the Unreal scenes, but we had some larger shots that we were working on as well. And so, yeah, I mean, it's an experience in itself, because Unreal Engine doesn't generally spit out renders like a traditional render. So that's something as a lead, you really have to help the juniors in particular, because that's not really something that they would have learned in school at this moment, right? So we would start bringing in those kind of renders, but then we also had the traditional renders. So it's like bringing those two together. You don't generally get a lot of control with Unreal Engine yet. I'm hoping in the future, like as the software gets developed and stuff, we can have more control over things. But yeah, I mean, we would then, like anything coming out of our department is pretty much, final by the client. So we're pretty much at the very end. So when things go crazy, it can get pretty crazy. So it's so important. I would say that like one of the most important things is just making sure, at least as a lead, making sure that they have all their mats, everything that they can do done, so that when things come in, because TV can get crazy. I haven't done film for a while, but yeah, TV requires you to be like ready for your renders, drop them in, and then we can start going through versions, Yeah, it gets pretty nuts.
That makes sense. And Arnon, how are you interjecting into the process all along? Are you looking at, is it dailies or is it weeklies, or what's your cadence?
Yeah, hearing everybody talk, it makes me miss being at a VFX facility. Because I am, several steps removed from that. So my process really starts, like I said, right from the beginning. There's a script, figuring out what it's going to cost, and reaching out once we realize, okay, we're going to make the movie, reaching out to VFX supervisors and VFX producers, hiring them, going out to the various vendors, figuring out, again, who has capacity, is it the right fit for the type of work, the quality of the work, the range of the work, and the scope of the project, and then working, through the process from development through prep, if it's on previs, if it's on concept work, storyboarding, during the shoot. Yes, I watch all the dailies, because for the most part, other than some quick trips to set, I'm not on set, because again, I manage, a bunch of projects at the same time. But looking through dailies to acquaint myself with what the work is, and also be able to have discussions. For the most part, I have at least weekly discussions with the leads on the project, Andrew, for example. And if he's on set, he will explain to me, what went on, what are the issues, things that come up. Part of my job is to help solve problems. It's very easy to, as we all know, throw everything to visual effects on the back end. My job is to say, no, we can't. So talking to the filmmakers, the director, the producers, and making sure that they do what they can to kind of stay on track. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's impossible. Things that we planned for didn't work. So my job is just to help kind of either rein that in or help the process. In post-production, it's the same thing, making sure that, or helping, really my job is really to kind of help facilitate the smoothest production as possible. So from the VFX kind of leadership team, the supervisor, producers, and the vendors, making sure that they have what they need. Sometimes you have films, that are not very communicative. I have to facilitate that, working out the schedules. Sometimes, again, things that we had imagined woodworks and creatures, for example, that we thought, okay, this would be really easy. Everybody loves the concept art. Once you design it and suddenly you start seeing it, in motion, you realize it's not quite working. It doesn't have the gravitas. It doesn't have the impact that we want. We have to go back to redesign it and redo it. And there's a whole effect, the downstream of that from a cost perspective, scheduling perspective, is huge. And again, getting approvals up the chain, making sure that the heads of the studio see the work, especially if it's significant work. And then leading it all the way, to the end, literally sitting in the DI at the end and making sure that, the shots that are final look good, sit in the movie, and we deliver it. So my interaction is really kind of across the board. And again, with some vendors I have very, direct relationship with, some I don't, but I try and infuse myself as much as possible, in the process and not just be, removed from it. But there's a lot of, just a lot of things to juggle continuously, because again, for the most part, a job is to put out fires. We try and, taking that analogy of fires, right? So we try to have a fire prevention strategy ahead of time, but fires do get, lit, and then it's our job to go in and try and help diffuse those fires and find solutions, both with people like Lara directly at facilities, or people like Andrew, the supervisors, and of course the filmmakers.
I like the analogy of the fire prevention strategy. I'd like to open up the Q&A to the audience. Do you guys have any questions? Any questions for anybody? Actually, just give us a second so you can...
What are your thoughts about home office and working remote? I mean, we had to do this now, so what are your thoughts about the future? We look forward to this.
And maybe position that in the context of younger artists getting into the industry and the challenges and
yeah,
the pros and cons of that.
That would be really nice to know if it would be possible to even start remote in a company, and not already being established like I am and I'm at home now. Do you think it would be possible to start as an artist remotely?
I can answer that if it helps. I feel that there's so much material online for training right now that I feel that you find really quickly that people can get up to speed if they have software, and you can get your skill set up really quickly. The one thing that if you're a new artist coming in that you don't have is that dynamic with your peers, so people sitting next to you. And when I think of the first 5 years of my career or more, you're really learning from what's around you. You're kind of contributing a lot less than you think you are, and you're really learning from the people around you. So it's not just the skills, it's also the people. So I think you can get skills to sort of answer your question, which is a really good one, because people are in that world right now. You can get the skills, but the thing you won't have is the peers and the mentors and learning the almost studio etiquette, the who does what, how does this work, where do you fit in a team of people. And that part, I think it would be impossible to do as someone coming into the industry working remotely.
And are there some strategies that they can take to better integrate with an existing team?
I'm sure there are. I think, but maybe I don't know what. Maybe someone else on the panel has a better idea.
So I think on my side, I've been kind of in this situation where we have like a bunch of new people, not only to a company but to the industry really, that are starting. And I think one thing that you don't learn online as well is, and that you're not ready for it, is also the pipeline of a big studio, And on that side, it can be a bit scary, I think, for new people. And on that side, one thing that we tend to do is kind of try to keep things very inclusive. And even though we are remote, it's very much about developing a culture of helping people and make sure that everybody's not left alone, like freaking out because they can't make their task work. So that's something that's very important, I think, when it comes to remote work, is having this feeling that at any time you could ask a question or something and be able to have some quick solution like you would have at the office, where you just like ask your friend next to your desk, right? And that's something that's very encouraged. And I think with the tool we have, either like Zoom or Google Meeting, you have like the possibility to kind of share your screen and do annotation, that kind of thing. So on that side, we actually found that it was very doable to do that. It's not probably the easiest solution for sure. It's, I think, especially for me, when I joined those companies, back then it was always on site and it was already a challenge, right? But doing it online is, through remote work, is still doable. It's doable, and I think everyone will be very understanding of the situation. So yeah, I would say it's very up to the team to kind of develop this culture.
Yeah, I can also speak a little bit to that. I think as a project organizer and somebody who's welcoming more juniors into the studio, it's really, really important to understand that when you enter a new studio, not only a new studio, but into a new industry, there's just so much information that the juniors need to wrap their head around. So it is so crucial to create an environment where you feel like asking a question is not, like, it does not make this person feel stupid. So just opening up and say like, hey, I know this is a lot. It's a lot to take in. Feel free to, I'd rather you ask than just like trying to come up with your own solutions. And so also from the experienced senior perspective, to understand that some really, really obvious things to us are like, you know, it needs some hand-holding and taking them through step by step. And it is extra work, definitely, when you have this whole remote situation happening. But as mentioned, like screen recording, screen share, all those are tools that can help us. We do need to restructure in understanding, like, how do we prevent like repetitive instructions and whatnot. So kind of, you know, because if there's a screen capture of a video and then you say, as you're having like an onboarding session, if you record it, then the junior can always just like go back to it and watch it again and do not feel stupid for not remembering something. It's just impossible to remember all those information just being like, you know, talking to. And so I think being aware is the most important step. And then, yeah, there's definitely ways. I still think that, as already mentioned, being physically there has so much benefit, just like human sociology perspective. It just helps so much to turn to somebody and be like, hey, you know, ask a question and kind of like listen to some conversations happening in the other end of the room and then like pick up from that. Sure, like we will definitely miss that as we kind of move on to like adapting to the new chapter. But yeah, this is what I would add to this topic.
So I want to thank all of the panelists that were able to join us today, and also the FMX people that are sitting to my left. They were great at being able to pull this innovative format together. It allowed us to have some people on site at FMX and some people all over the world. We had people from London, Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto, where am I missing? And in LA. It was really, really great to have everybody join like this during a live event where we have a live audience that we're able to see everyone tapping in from afar. So thank you to the FMX guys who were able to make this all happen through their technology. And thank you to all of the panelists that dedicated their time to sharing your knowledge and your experiences and your career paths. I hope that everybody here got something out of it, and we'll share this on the web afterwards as well. So with that, we're signing off. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For moderating.
Bye. Thank you.